Patrick, did you get liquidated on Farcoin? How are you doing on Farcoin?
Yeah, man, I can't believe I got liquidated on that Farcoin long the other day. Oh, we're live? Oh, welcome back to Drink with the Devs.
Whoa.
So what do you want to talk about? What do you want to talk about for this Drink with the Devs specifically?
All right. Well, first off, what are we sipping on? Marston.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about this.
Enlighten us. So we got what do we have, Mike?
This
Here, Marston?
is
Great caramel color.
Caribou Crossing. It is a single barrel Canadian whiskey. First ever single barrel Canadian whiskey. And
whoa, wow.
It is
what does that
Sazerac
mean?
Distillery, which is probably my favorite.
Canadian, Quebec, 40%.
Yeah, it's only 40%. It's 80 proof, but it's a good, as far as Canadian whiskey goes, it's really good.
It's very smooth.
Are you getting any notes?
Am I getting any notes? Great caramel flavor. I can smell the single barrel. I can tell that more than one barrel hasn't been here. This is just one. It's really smooth. It's very smooth. It's good. It doesn't really bite a whole lot.
Beats Crown, I will. It definitely beats Canada Club.
But does the culture beat the Crown Royal?
Does
Caribou beat? Yeah, just in general. I just feel Crown Royal is
I think
amazing.
the fact that there's Caribou on top wins. But
let's talk about last year. Let's just talk about what we did last year. And specifically, I want to talk about Jackal Vault.
Yeah.
Because that was kind of the part that I feel like I kind of like joined in kind of at the beginning of that little bit.
Yeah,
so
you hopped on and we said, can you design Jackal Vault? Even though you're a video guy. And you said, I'll give it my best shot.
No, that's not how it worked. I said it should kind of look like this and we should get someone else to make it better. And we were like, no, we should just make it look like this. And
then you said Figma is close enough to a video editing program that I can probably make do.
I'll figure it out.
It's pretty good though, right? So when we started, so when we finished V4 was the big upgrade that got the protocol more stable and it was scalable and it was beautiful. So the next question.
Move this over here just in case it's blocking your face.
Oh, maybe.
Yeah, talk across it like that. It looks amazing. It's good.
The next question was, okay, so now that we have the protocol stable and it does its storage thing, it's just like, how do we communicate that to people? So how would they walk up to the protocol, open an app, and just understand like instantly like what this protocol does, right? So Jackal Vault was kind of like the perfect consumer application that we thought we could build, where it's just kind of like similar to a Dropbox or a Google Drive, just on blockchain rails, fully self-custodial. You get all the benefits. You have the multi-region geo-distributed storage. You have the verifiability. You have the auto-healing, the self-custody, and all that stuff. So
I mean, it was a great case study for the protocol.
Oh, it's a beautiful case study. And I think it's a great application for like the use cases that they're used for, right? So like if you're looking to store very sensitive files, whether it's like about your life, it could be your passport, anything like that, in a self-custodial manner, completely on chain. Awesome use case, in my opinion.
I've literally put a scan of my driver's license on there because I was like, I might need that one day, and I know it's never going down. So
I was online, and somehow I went down the rabbit hole of like when you eventually make it, you have like 3 opportunities. It's like number 1 is like start a space company. Number 2 is you start like doomsday prepping like a Sam Altman. And then number 3 is like you just try to live forever like a Brian Johnson. So like those are your 3 options for like those guys that made it. So I went down the prepping rabbit hole. I was like, what's prepping all about? And they gave me this checklist of all these different things. Like you need a go bag and you need like a quick like day bag if you need to just get out of the house quick. You need a vehicle, all these different bunker, like all these different things, right? And one of them is you need a flash drive of everything that is important to you.
Oh,
which was interesting.
That makes sense.
So I was thinking, just like, man, like I just like copied everything that I had, driver's license, passports, all like deeds to homes and things like that. That are the things that are the most important. And I just like threw my seed phrase in the bag instead of like having a hard drive, which is pretty cool.
But Jackal Vault was also great because it's just a file manager, which is something that everybody already knows how to use and to upload files and can kind of test all the storage out on. I think some things we didn't know is people expect a lot from a file manager.
Yes.
People have been using file managers since, I don't know, the dawn of GUI
the first
time.
GUI. Yeah.
So they expect a lot from them. They expect them to work fast. They, it's there's not a lot of leeway. I feel like with some other like crypto apps, you're like sending money and it's taking like, like even if it's only taking like, I guess like ETH is what, like 15 minutes at some points in time.
Per block,
like things are
like
high.
a block time for ETH, like 15, 13.
I think it's less now because they're not dealing with the gas wars, but Yeah, it's definitely like a few minutes to finalize things.
And people are fine with that. You know what I mean? They don't really seem to be, well, maybe not fine with it, but
like
now that like Solana
Base, the L2,
that's very true.
fast block times now. But still, even when you're using those, like, still has a little bit of latency. You know, it's like,
and the time to finality on Base is like, they even say like a lot of applications are okay to like use 1 or 2 blocks, but like they say you're supposed to have like 30 blocks, which is like almost a full minute on Base, even that you're supposed to wait for. Like if you send from Base to like a centralized exchange, they're not going to verify the transaction for like a full
instantly,
minute.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's also just like often like you, even with like the fast block time chains, you also have the situation where like you get a lot of failed transactions too, that I've noticed.
Yeah, Solana is really bad for it.
At the end of the day, like when you're comparing like sending tokens to managing files, it's a little bit more of a familiar experience, as you're saying, right?
Yeah, like people already know that it's fast. They've been doing it for decades at this point, and it's been fairly fast.
I mean, Xerox had it down, man.
Yeah. No, so basically, like there's things that are unexpected, right? It's like every time you want to change a file or move a file or share a file, you do have to sign a transaction. And we have to work on ways to make that better, right? So the goal is cloud parity. And getting into cloud parity is super important for us. So a big thing is like we've been talking about account abstraction and different ways that you can create wallets that do auto-proof transactions and do some stuff depending on where you want to be on the sliding scale of security. So if you want it to be more secure, then like you're going to have to sign every transaction, okay? But if you want to kind of have a little bit more of a faster experience or more familiar experience, then you go down like the security like I guess paradigm where it's a little bit easier, it's a little bit quicker. It does the transactions for you. You don't have to sit there and wait and sign and do all that stuff. So I think that's kind of where we're heading for a UX standpoint inside of things.
Yeah, I mean, I think our kind of like, I guess our motto, I guess for 2025 is like, go to where the users want to be. And that's both like platform specific and also just like how we do things. So we want to bring Jackal Storage to the users in the way that the users expect it to be, not so much the way we're telling them it is. And like the original GUI, right? Like they had to learn how to use a GUI from the get-go. The GUI has been the same for like 30 years.
Yeah.
So, and like every file manager looks the same too.
So we need to meet them there instead of trying to come up with this new way to display information and expect them to learn, because it's too mature now.
And I like that. I like that. That's where we're moving. You move to a place where you want to remove as much friction, like systemic friction as possible. And this is a UX problem, not just for Jackal, but just like across the board for blockchains, right? You want to remove systemic friction, and you also want to like remove sand out of the engine. So like the more security and the more stuff, the more friction happens. And the last thing that I think is important is we just have to deliver the product where the users are, as Marston was saying.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, we're already seeing like a kind of industry-wide shift with, 5 years ago, username and password was the standard for everything. And then we were like, well, 2-factor authentication is really cool. And we started getting these verification systems in place. Yeah. And now it's very quickly, it's Passkeys.
And it's like Passkeys and OAuth and stuff like that.
And that's all public-private key encryption.
Yeah.
It's just kind of hidden behind these web standards that Apple and Google and Microsoft are kind of all coming to consensus on, because they've very quickly realized that public-private key system that Bitcoin introduced for like user accounts is really the best way to securely handle things, and they're not going to stop that. So might as well create a really good system for it. And I mean, that's where they are, and that's where, admittedly, a lot of the kind of crypto ecosystem is right now when we're trying to get into like account abstraction. I know
like a Hyperliquid or a Photon or things like that.
I mean, even there's I forget what it's called now, but there's a social media platform that was spun out on Base.
Farcaster, or is it Zora?
No, it was I sent it to you one time, but the entire platform is built around passkeys. You literally cannot have an account without creating a passkey based account, and it works really, really great because you don't think it's Web3. But I think with that, we're gonna see more and more of that, and trying to meet the users into passkeys. Google and Apple and Microsoft are doing the hard work of getting people used to passkeys, so we might as well kind of ride that wave with them.
First off, I have a love-hate relationship with a passkey. One, I love it because I can sign in fast. I can move fast.
I love using Face ID to get into my GitHub, man.
Two though, I hate it because I enabled a passkey on Coinbase, and I'm so used to it, like having me like do the two-factor authentication and very like slowly moving, and then I accidentally did like the cash out instantaneously and pay a whatever % fee, and then I got hosed for a decent amount of money, and that was kind of upsetting. No. But with great responsibility comes great power. That one, her too.
I made a similar mistake with Coinbase recently, where you're doing a withdrawal, and you have a situation where like it auto goes to PayPal.
Yes, or mine auto goes to like you like do it instantaneously for like X amount of fee.
I had an instantaneous thing where it went to PayPal, and then like
that seems weird.
And then I had to create a PayPal account to like get those funds, and then like I was just like,
wait, you didn't have a linked account; it just went to PayPal.
No, it just went to PayPal, and then
it just gets sent to your email.
With my email. So
what?
Like, then
Coinbase in Canada is very weird.
What? But then I was just like, I didn't mean to do that, so I wanted to send it back to Coinbase because it was an accident. I just wanted to like sell tokens so I can rebalance the portfolio. And I had to send it to my bank from PayPal and then send it back to Coinbase to rebalance. It was really frustrating.
That sounds annoying. It sounds annoying during tax season. Now I have an extra transaction. Okay, let's back it up again just a little bit. And the reason why we're talking about this with Jackal Vault is right now when you're uploading files, there's a lot of, approving of transactions. If you have a lot of files, you got to approve a lot of stuff. Using a ledger on it is kind of a pain in the ass because you really got to click that right button like 1,000 times.
Even if Ledger worked on Jackal right now, you'd have to you'd get carpal tunnel in your fingers. Yeah.
So, are we going to switch to a passkey model, or are we? I know we've talked about account. I know we've talked about account abstraction. Is this when that goes in?
Yeah, I mean, so our kind of main focus in terms of getting account systems smoothed out, especially when it comes to Ledger. Passkeys are very much on the table, as well as private key systems through something like a hot wallet, but you're paying with like a credit card and you're not ever experiencing gas transactions. So we've kind of been playing around with this account model where you let a third party post your transactions for you, as well as pay your gas and pay your storage plan through like a credit card model, but you're using something like a passkey to generate your encryption key so that third party, in this case, it would be Jackal Labs as a first option, wouldn't be able to see your data. We would simply act as a way for you to get your transactions to chain. So, I mean, in theory, you could have a denial of service attack if we were ever, for some reason, malicious. But your files would never be compromised from a platform risk. And because you'd be using it through like a passkey model, Jackal Labs could only post transactions that your passkey signed off on. So as much as Jackal Labs could deny you service, they could never, I guess we could never, take your files down or see what those files are, which is something that is pretty unique to the Jackal platform. And it's not something that any other storage layer has right now. So we're looking at that as an option, as well as potentially just a really straightforward improvement on the Ledger side, where we basically generate a new account out of your Ledger. Instead of your Ledger signing every transaction, you would generate a brand new account using your Ledger's signature as a seed, which is it's how we do all of our encryption stuff right now. It's probably the most like tried and tested way of managing any sort of encryption systems using crypto rails. And if it's been good enough so far in terms of the encryption side of things, as well as other platforms using it for encryption, generating temporary accounts out of that storage key is something that we're looking into as well to make the Ledger experience really, really smooth.
So what am I actually doing? My wallet's creating a new wallet. I'm just signing off on that for what? Just like a series, like a just amount of time and a like amount of
like every
Jackal
time
that
you
I've loaded up.
Boot up your browser and open the Jackal Vault. Essentially, you would create, like you'd sign off on, it wouldn't even be a transaction. It would just be kind of an arbitrary signature. And you'd sign off on a series of text that is deterministic by the protocol's website. And from there, you would get a brand new seed phrase. You wouldn't even know this is happening because it'll be happening in your browser. And then essentially your seed phrase would be stored in your browser's memory. So it would be ever so slightly less secure than a ledger, but the user experience would be a lot better. So that's kind of where
trade-off.
Where our head's at.
They're all trade-offs regardless of what you do. But
yeah, like usability and security are on sliding scales, right? I mean,
Right.
you like to say it where the more locks you put on the door, the longer it takes you to get into your house. And that's 100% true for crypto as well. So we've been playing around with a few ideas. Obviously, fixing Ledger is a priority for us, but the usability of a Ledger platform is really, really bad because of how big the transactions are. And I know a lot of the new Ledger firmware doesn't even allow us to sign like more than 2 files at a time or something. So it makes it really, really bad. And I know Stargaze was dealing with a similar thing for certain NFT.
Why don't they let you sign more than 2 files?
So they did a firmware update where if you update your ledger past a certain point, I think for the Nano S specifically, it limits the max transaction size that you can sign. And it's like 2 files make that transaction size too big and you can no longer sign it. And I know Stargaze was dealing with it for a while where their NFT platform, if you were to like mint certain NFTs, it straight up would not let you on Ledger because the transactions were too big.
What?
Yeah.
Do we think this is big Ledger wanting you to buy more ledgers because you have to click more and the button wears out faster, so you're gonna have to buy a new
Ledger.
one sooner? It's big Ledger.
Big Ledger. Yeah, admittedly, like we've been in talks with the Ledger team, and it feels like it's a very disconnected system in place there, where like the people that make the Cosmos application on Ledger that Jackal piggybacks off to make Kepler work, they're not the same people building the Ledger, and so it wasn't even Ledger's fault that this limitation was put on. It was what are their names?
So there's Ledger,
with
there's
them at one point.
team that makes the Cosmos app, and then there's all the blockchains. We're gonna have like three parties that need to be aligned in order for the Ledger system to work.
And then with the way that the Cosmos is kind of updating, the Cosmos app is updating to be more aligned with the newer versions of the SDK. And so because we haven't updated to the SDK 50, we're kind of behind on that. And so our structure that we use to sign on the Ledger platform is out of date. And that's why it broke.
That's exciting. So in theory, once we get the passkey here, once you can pay with a credit card, you can just sign into Vault. You don't see any wallet transactions at all.
Yeah.
And we pretty much just look exactly like every other Web 2 app. Like it doesn't even seem like a Web 3 app.
You use your Ledger to sign into the application, and then past that point, it feels like a Web 2 application.
I like that. Look at us getting closer to a Web 2 app.
Yeah, we're trying. That's what we're going for, right? We're going for cloud parity. We really, really, really want to be at parity with the systems that we're used to. And obviously, when you're building in Web 2, you kind of like you start. Like you look at like an AWS or Google Cloud or Microsoft Azure, they don't start by building like the actual infrastructure. That was like the Cisco's in the world and those guys, and how are they doing today? But like they started at they started at the app layer. Like Amazon had their bookstore, and then Google had their search engine. Microsoft was making software for like operating systems and stuff like that, right? And then they moved down the stack. So in crypto and in blockchain land, it's flipped on its head, where you start at the bottom of the stack and then you build to the apps, rather than the other way around, especially like at the current stage that we are in, like the stage of crypto. It feels like we're still in like 1997.
We're very early in this space, and it definitely feels kind of like the .com bubble, where we're just pushing stuff out for the sake of it sometimes.
So I just wanted to reflect on the fact that obviously the team is working on making the Jackal protocol, which is, the actual backbone of the entire thing. Vault's just an app on top of that. So Vault has like some limitations and stuff like that
for now
that like protocol does not have. So Jackal Vault's limitations are not reflective of the whole thing.
Protocol directly, because the browser limitations and stuff like that. Yeah, like the upload file size and things.
Sometimes I just wonder, do we like pain? Because we decided to make a file manager and a protocol underneath it. Dropbox doesn't even make the underlying infrastructure, and they're worth $9.47 billion. So we're
it's a good question.
Not that we're necessarily competing directly with Dropbox, because Vault is still, it's still for a little bit of the hardos to like a certain degree. Like it's a more secure product.
Power users right now is what it's for.
Yeah, it's a case study. It allows anyone to throw up a file and see that the actual protocol works. Because I still don't know how to upload a file to Filecoin. I tried to upload one a while ago, but I don't know how, because I don't know how to code or anything. Maybe I should reinvestigate.
Yeah.
Maybe
Well,
there's
like
some separate
honestly, like
options.
if you're listening, you should probably just go try all the other applications and then try Vault. Like that's my like advice. People say like, well, how does this compare? It's like go try it, and and then come and then come back, and then we can go and compare head to head. But when it comes to like user experience of just like start to finish, like uploading a file to Jackal Vault versus anything else that's on the market right now, it's pretty special in the sense that you can get up and running with Jackal, assuming you have Jackal tokens and you have money in crypto land. You can create your account, purchase storage, and get a file uploaded within like what do you think, like a minute, 2 minutes?
It's pretty quick. I mean, I feel like we'll probably do a little tech demo of this tomorrow once we're like well rested. But anytime you upload a file to Jackal Vault, it gets locally encrypted on your box, so Vault can never see your data. And when I mean Vault, I mean I don't know, storage providers, other people helping run the Jackal protocol. So when we were making Vault, we were uploading like images and videos and all this other stuff, and there were no thumbnails. And I told Patrick and Marston, I was like, that's a non-negotiable thing. I need to have thumbnails. I can't just be downloaded random shit and not knowing what it is until I download the full file.
We can't see the data. So Marston, how do you get around that, dude?
Yeah. So we were chatting and Aaron was like, well, guys, we put so much into the actual like metadata of the file, and that's fully encrypted. But it goes onto the blockchain layer rather than the storage platform layer. And what we were looking at is like we already store the name of the file, the size of the file, and like a bunch of metadata about the file. And he was like, guys, we could probably just throw up another field in there and store a thumbnail, as long as the thumbnail's small enough of an image.
An encrypted thumbnail.
An encrypted thumbnail. Yes. And he was like, as long as it's small enough, we could make it work. And then I know you and him played around with WebP, the image format.
I compressed a lot of files. And when I mean a lot of files, I mean I compressed one file a lot of times.
Yeah. and you guys looked at like what the best image size and compression ratio was to get something that looked okay.
You need a little fidelity.
Yeah. Like, I mean, I was uploading like some NFTs, and I think it was the Mad Scientists where like they're very pixelated, right? And they came out a little blurry around the edges, but I mean, they still look pretty good in the Vault, and that way we can store like the actual image metadata on chain, and it takes up like, I mean, what was it, like half a kilobyte
it's
or
very
something
small.
for like a 256 by 256 image.
The WebP compression is good.
WebP is insane.
It's good.
And that's basically the only reason it worked. Like if we were looking at like PNG or JPEG, if we were able to make it work, they would look terrible. They would look so bad.
And they would be bigger, larger.
It'd be bigger. It would be bigger and look worse. So that was the kind of thought process
Shout
there.
out
And
Shout out
Google.
This podcast is sponsored by Google's WebP.
WebP. Do you have images that need to be tiny?
Yeah, I know. It's like for some
Try
reason
WebP today.
Google has chokehold on everything we do.
Speaking
from
of
programming language to compression
At least
libraries.
it's all open source. At least it's all open source.
Well, speaking of that, how does a Google versus like a Drop versus every other, Web 2 kind of thing, how are they making thumbnails? Like, how is our process different? Why does it need to be, I guess, is the real issue.
So the thing is, right, Google, Dropbox, they can see your files. And the fact that they can see your files is, when it comes to usability, a very big leg up on something like Jackal. So we have to do a lot more work in the user's browser to make that come to parity. So when we go ahead and take in the file, so you're uploading your file into your web browser, instead of what Google does, where they take the file in, they process it, they do a bunch of stuff on their servers, and then they spit out a thumbnail. And anytime you go to like load up a preview of that image, they hand you back the thumbnail. And they're probably generating like 10 copies of the thumbnail at different sizes. So depending on how big they need to show the thumbnail, they can send you a different image format with different quality ratios. And the fact of the matter is Jackal just can't do that because Jackal has no visibility of what your file is. We don't even know if it's an image or if it's a PDF or if it's a video or if it's a text file. So because of that, all of that has to be done in the user's browser. So that thumbnail gets made as the file's uploading and then directly embedded into the blockchain as it goes up. And I mean, that system uses up a lot of extra memory and compute power. Obviously, when you're only uploading like images, images generally aren't that big, so it's not a huge problem. But it's definitely more work for the Jackal protocol to make that happen than something like Google. But with that, Jackal,
I guess
as
more
a
work
protocol,
for the client.
Yeah,
More
more
work for us.
Yeah, more work for us because we had to make it, and more work for your browser because it doesn't just need to send the file somewhere; it needs to do a lot of processing on it. And with that, though, the huge upside is nobody ever sees your thumbnail. You are the only person that ever sees your thumbnail, unless you share it with somebody. Obviously,
Sure.
then you're gonna let them see that thumbnail. But
self-custodial thumbnails, baby. Let's go.
fully self-custodial thumbnails, fully self-custodial metadata on all your
on
files.
chain. They're basically ordinals.
But like this is the issue. Yeah, that we're too used to the creature comforts of a regular file manager, and I need all of them. I need all of them.
No, if that's what you're used to, we have to meet that experience. If we want cloud parity, we have to do the basics at least. Like those are table stakes for us to get going, you know? So like thumbnails, I'm happy that we're able to do it, and we're really excited that it's finally there. Like people can see their files. It's all encrypted, it's still self-custodial. It's pretty special.
I sometimes have some large files, and right now Vault can only do a 1.3 gigabyte file, and I need to upload lots of files. This last big podcast clip that I shot on this camera was over 400 gigabytes, and I didn't bring a second hard drive, so I actually tried to upload it to Google or to Dropbox because I have a lot of cloud storage, and neither of them would accept it through the browser because the 400 gigabyte file was too large, to be fair. But right now we're hitting 1.3 gigabyte max in Vault, specifically Vault, not on the protocol, in Vault.
So
why are we hitting that 1.3 gigabyte max? I'm trying to upload 1.4 gigabyte files.
The issue is the limitations on the browser side, right? So you only have so much. The browser only has access to so much memory on your computer, in your RAM.
I think Chrome has 4 gigs.
4
on
gigs.
Modern systems.
Yeah.
Why does it only do 4?
4 gigs to work with, right? So like if we have 4 gigs to work with, you have you're processing all that in the browser locally. Encryption bloats it. We have to make the Merkle tree and do all that stuff, right? So that like takes up a lot of memory. So like the 1.4 gigabyte limitation is actually browser imposed. But how do we get around that, right? It moves into what can we do? We can, number one, that's not a limitation at the CLI. So when you're using the CLI, you can upload as many gigs or terabytes or petabytes as you want. But on the other side of things, so we can get around this by, for example, like building like a desktop application. Right, so you can access Jackal directly from your desktop, so we can sidestep the browser. That would be like the ideal way to do that. When you start getting into the other products that we're making, we have the S3 API, for example. So people can just use that API and upload as much as they want. They can use Jackal Pin, which is another API, and you can upload as much as you want to IPFS.
Wait, can I upload a more than 1.3 gigabyte file to Jackal Pin?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because it's not encrypting the file, so it doesn't.
Yes.
So at minimum, a 4 gigabyte file.
The maximum on Jackal Pin, because there is a maximum set on the protocol level, and we haven't specifically built any system into Jackal Pin to stitch files together, is 32 gigs. So right now, the maximum file size you can upload to Jackal Pin is 32 gigabytes. From the protocol's perspective, every
big.
file is max 32 gigs. What we've been looking at for files larger than that is because we have the file tree system. Individual files that are just stored on like the storage platform through like IPFS, they're going to be max 32 gigs. If you want a bigger file than that, then on the file tree system, we're able to kind of blend multiple files together. So we have a content field in all of our file tree entries. And right now they contain which file on the storage module they relate to. And because those are all 32 gigs, what we can do is we can actually like list out, this file here, it's 60 gigabytes or something. It is this file and this file. And then when we download both of them, we're just going to stitch them like front to back. And boom, your file's back together. Yeah. So we have, as far as like the protocol's concerned, it thinks everything's maximum 32. But as far as a user's concerned,
there's no limit.
A lot more.
Yeah, it's pretty special by just stitching everything together, and it's pretty exciting stuff.
Well, and then the last thing I want to talk about, and I'm only talking about it because we've had a lot of people ask, folder uploads.
Yeah.
Are we going to be able to do folder uploads through the Vault front end, or should we wait on the desktop app to do that syncing?
Eventually, folder uploads are going to be a thing, but ideally, we want to do folder uploads really well, right? We don't want to create a system where we are uploading individual files and making it feel slow or sluggish in any way. And the way that a browser does folders is if you upload a folder to your browser, you're not actually uploading your folder. You're uploading a bunch of individual files, and they just have this weird little tag on them that says, hey, I'm part of this folder. And so what we have to do is we have to actually go through our upload process and modify it so that before we take in all of those files, right? Like we have to take them in to read the data, but we have to put the shim in to make sure that if there is a folder that they belong to, we create that folder before we upload to it. And that creates a whole slew of potential memory issues where now we're loading in all those files. We got to do stuff, wait for that transaction to finish, at least finish generating, and then shovel all those files through it. And if you start uploading too many files at the same time, which is, I mean, realistically, what you're going to be doing with folder uploads, you're not doing it to upload 2 files, right?
No, I'm doing it to like keep a folder tree intact, if anything.
Yeah. And that process, due to those 4 gig browser limitations, we start hitting a lot of problems, and we're looking at streaming a lot of this stuff, especially with account abstraction, where we might have to bundle something into like 2 or 3 transactions.
What do you mean
bundle
streaming?
things, the streaming is just like, in this case, it would be like if you have 100 files, we deal with the first 20 and then do something with those. And
that
then
makes sense.
the next 20 we do something with, and then the next 20. So we do them like sequentially as they come in. And that way we can handle only 20 at a time. And that way we only need to deal with 20 of those files worth of RAM limitations. So with that, we start looking at potentially like account abstraction. So you're only signing, like you can sign like 2 or 3 transactions instead of just one all at one time, where that one might be simply too big to sign. But if you're using a ledger or something along those lines, right, you don't want to sign 3 transactions back to back to upload a folder.
You have to use account abstraction for that, yeah.
So your whole user experience is really hindered until we have a better system in place like account abstraction. And that's where our main focus is right now, because that lets us do a lot more for the user than you'd even really consider.
So I have been a Dropbox power user for a long time. I got started like, during the free 2 gigabyte thing. I invited friends. I got my 50 megabytes of free storage. I was ditching thumb drives and using Dropbox to print out papers in college and bullshit like that. And I guess what I'm saying is I was on the kind of along the ride for that app the whole time. And like even just a few years ago, the browser experience, like uploading stuff to Dropbox, was like very watered down. Like you couldn't do like folder structure uploads. And I was a desktop app. Like I mandated it. Like anytime I worked with anybody, I'd be like, you need to download the desktop app immediately and just kind of like ditch out on everything.
It's just more powerful, right?
Well, the browser's gotten a lot different in the past couple of years too.
It's gotten better.
It's gotten a lot better. I mean, even it's gotten better, and it's also gotten weirdly worse in some ways. Where,
what do you mean worse? I'm scared.
A couple of years ago, we didn't have what's called Fetch, and Fetch is a system in the browser right now which lets us make web requests. It is very good at what it does. The problem is Fetch, unlike the classic XML request or whatever, it's like XHTTP request library, you can't monitor the download progress or the upload progress.
Back up for a second. What is a web request?
Web request is
click on something. I'm requesting it. Yes. I'm requesting the data.
So if you click on a link, essentially you're making a request, and every time you click a login button after you enter your username and password, that's making a web request. So those requests are either managed by your platform. In this case, like it could be like your HTML platform for like form submissions, like your login forms, or it can happen in the background through like a JavaScript library that you don't see happening. Yeah, that's how most web requests happen today. And up until fairly recently, that wasn't how most web requests were happening. Most web requests were happening because of some HTML directive, like a form submission or a link click. And the internet's taken a very different shape in the past 10 years because of JavaScript web frameworks. And what we're seeing is the rise of something like Fetch over existing HTML request libraries is they've stripped a lot out, and a lot of what we're used to in things like upload progress just don't exist in Fetch unless we want to take it even further and start building with experimental versions of Fetch. But then we need HTTP2, which is something that not every web server supports. So even storage providers on Jackal, if they're using an old version of what's called a reverse proxy, which kind of keeps their system secure, they might not have HTTP2 enabled. And we're really big on supporting legacy systems. So a lot of those creature comforts that come with existing applications, they just don't exist in the modern web anymore. And anytime you see upload progress bars, there's a lot of kind of programming magic happening, whether that be a lot of estimates and checking or a lot of custom built software to work around upload progress bars. And so a lot of those systems are really, really difficult to do in a decentralized environment.
What do you mean to work around an upload progress bar? What's wrong with an upload I enjoy an upload progress bar. It lets me know where I'm at in life.
Yeah. They're all like, every upload progress bar is fake.
What's happening when you upload to Dropbox? It's a really, really cool system. But they've really built around this is you send your upload, right? Your upload is not being tracked at all by your initial upload request.
Because it's not in the programming language.
Exactly. So what we're seeing is Dropbox's server itself is keeping track. You have an ID number. It says like, yes, I got this file. Your file has this tracking number. It sends you back that tracking number in the response. And then every second or so, your progress bar is inching along. That's all fake. But then every
progress bar is fake.
Every second or so, it corrects itself and goes, how far along am I? And then if it's, say, like at 8%, but the actual file's at 15%, then it'll jump up really quick. And that's why you'll notice your progress bars aren't always very smooth. They're a little choppy. And it's because they're doing a lot of hidden magic and a lot of custom workarounds to make sure that happens. And that's far easier to do in a centralized system where you know exactly what your upload's going to look like and you know exactly what the server you're hitting is going to look like. Whereas something like Jackal, because we're uploading straight to the storage providers, we don't know if the storage providers are going to have HTTP2, or we don't know if they're going to have
and you don't even know what the file
version.
is.
And we don't know what the file is either. So there's a lot of difficulty in building a distributed system where a lot of those nice comforts that something like Dropbox or Google Drive have are in theory possible, but just far harder to implement because there's so many security guarantees and so many version mismatches of existing software that we can't account for very reasonably. And some of the time we would just end up fully having to fake it.
So if you want a progress bar, we can make it up for you though. We can make it up. We'll make you the best progress bar.
Can't we make one that's just always at 99?
Yeah, it just sits at 99 the entire time, but
and it never goes up or down.
Yeah.
So if I upload a file, let's say it's 50 gigs big, right? I know 32 gigs is like the limit right now. So if I upload a bigger file, it's gonna like split it. Like in theory, if that file gets like encrypted and it's streaming, right? It's streaming up to the storage providers. They don't really know when the file's going to end, right? Because it's like an encrypted file, and they don't have like metadata on the file.
Yeah, and
do they know how big it is, or do they know it's 50 gigs?
No. So when you're uploading a file, there's a few things that we can potentially do, but again, this is the trouble with the distributed system: is when we take in your file, your file has a start signifier and an end signifier, and then everything in between. And so our servers know when it starts. And we know when it ends, but we don't know how big it's going to be until it ends.
What do you mean you know when it starts and when it ends, but we don't know how big it's going to be? I don't if I know where it starts and I know where it ends, I know like that's how I measure between 2 points.
But it doesn't know when it ends until it ends.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so we pull in the entire file, and then once it ends, it ends. But if your file is 32 gigs, we'll have to pull in the full 32 gigs to even figure out it's 32 gigs.
So it doesn't know when it ends. It knows when it's ended.
Yes, exactly. There are systems that exist where you essentially send it some sort of confirmation that, hey, I'm about to send you 32 gigs. Is that okay? And then the server goes, yeah, that's okay. You can send me 32 gigs. And then it'll start sending you the 32 gigs and build out a progress indicator that way. But again, the problem with that is being that we're in such a distributed environment, we can't guarantee that everyone's going to pertain to the same standards that exist. So something like Nginx, they're a reverse proxy. They keep things secure. They are potentially running a lot of different system defaults than somebody running a different reverse proxy. And us relying on how that file is being delivered through the reverse proxy is near impossible. And because of that, making those progress indicators, we might hit one storage provider where the progress indicator works flawlessly. We might hit another one where it literally says 0% until it's done.
It's pretty cool stuff.
Wait, so if I upload a file, let's keep using the 50 gig kind of thing right now. The protocol doesn't know when it's going to end. It just knows if it's ended, right? Take that, bookmark that for just a second. Yeah. I was just trying to copy one of these 400 gigabyte files to another hard drive, and my Mac was like, no, you may not copy to this drive because there's not enough space. If I store a file on a storage provider, does that entire file have to be with one storage provider? Yeah. And if so, how would it know if there's enough space?
So the storage providers themselves, essentially when you send in that file, if for some reason there is not enough space, it will stream in as much as it possibly can into the system's memory. Mm-hmm. And then before it writes it to disk, it'll go, do I have enough space? Because it says, I have the whole file, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think our minimum recommendation is 64 gigs of memory. So it can pull in that full 32 gigs into its memory. It won't ever write it to disk. And then it'll go, well, my disk only has 31. So no, now that I know it's 32 gigs, no, I'm not going to take it. And so the storage provider knows that it can't actually hold on to it. It can take it, but then it'll tell you very quickly after it's got the whole thing that no, it can't have it anymore.
Yeah. So what happens then? It kicks to the next storage provider basically until
it loops over until it finds one that works.
It's like finding a parking spot.
And is Jackal is also making storage deals on individual files, like underneath the hood, right? Like my account is not with 3 providers. One file is with 3.
Exactly. Yeah. So if you have a storage provider that has 33 gigabytes and you store 2 gigabytes, it'll take it. And then if you upload another file that's 32 gigs and it can no longer take it, it won't take that file, but it'll happily continue to store the first file you sent it. So it doesn't run into storage limitations when it comes to existing files because those are already on a reserved space. It'll only matter for new files coming in. Yeah.
Oh. All right. So now I want to get into a little bit more nerd talk. So Marston, you and I were talking the other day how Jackal actually stores data on the protocol in an IPFS format. Patrick bailed. He's like, he doesn't have time for this part.
I can't take IPFS anymore. We've talked about IPFS too much today.
Well, so I found this whole part of the Jackal protocol like very interesting. So when I upload a file to Jackal, the storage providers store it in an IPFS format.
Yes.
And the reason why they do that is because if we need to pin something to IPFS, boom, there we go. It's done. It's good to go.
Yes.
Talk to me about the quote unquote IPFS format and how it's different from the normal format. What do we even call the normal format? I just learned about all this. I need a refresher.
Admittedly, it kind of doesn't really have a solid name. Filecoin stores files the exact same as any other platform, but it does put kind of an extra layer in between. So when you store something, not Filecoin, IPFS.
IPFS.
I mean, Filecoin and IPFS store data very, very similarly. But IPFS has this virtual file system in place called Unix FS, which means Unix file system. And essentially what that does is when you store a file to Unix FS, you convert it into a Unix FS format. And what that means is your file might be 2 gigabytes, but Unix FS has chunking parameters, which take that file and turn it into a bunch of chunks. And those chunks are, I think, about 1 kilobyte or...
Is that the professional term? A chunking.
Yeah.
Is it really?
It is a
chunking parameter.
A new chunker is what it's called.
Whoa, a chunker. A new chunker.
And that system turns that individual file into a lot of smaller files. Those smaller files are just pieces of a bigger file.
Sounds like the opposite of a chunk. Sounds like we're de-chunking. We're de-chunking.
We're splitting it into chunks.
Chunking would be taking the small ones and chunking them. Okay, I guess that's okay.
You know what I mean? But so it splits them into a bunch of smaller pieces, and those smaller pieces are written to your storage provider's hard drive, the exact same any other file would.
Okay.
I think you and I explored it actually the other day, where we looked at the folder structure of all of those IPFS files, and we were looking at it, they were like 14 kilobytes. We were like, whoa, the maximum size of these files, like they all turn out to be 14 kilobytes.
Oh, the individual chunks are 14 kilobytes.
Yeah. And I think like different chunkers have different parameters. I know like web3.storage has different chunking parameters than Pinata, and they have different chunking parameters than us.
But isn't everything like chunking data? Like I've always been like, I don't know. I guess I don't know a lot about storing data, but I know about like multiplexing on a Wi-Fi router, like sending packets and stuff like that. Isn't that how everything works? Don't we just cut everything up into little tiny bits?
You
and send it out?
can do. I know. So
how is the IPFS different from that? I guess is what I'm wondering.
For a lot of machines, specifically based around like Linux and Mac OS, because most of the stuff is kind of virtualized on Windows, is built around striping things to your disk. So if you think of like a hard drive, right, it's got that little needle and an actual physical disk that spins around.
Yeah.
And so when you're writing a file, you will start writing a file and the disk will continue to spin. And so your file literally will be like a stripe on the disk like this.
Well, unless you're like me and you've deleted a bunch of shit and you got to defrag that shit. You don't have to defrag anything anymore, do you? I haven't defragged anything in a long time.
Defragging happens in the background a lot now. So you're still defragging it. But exactly that. If your disk, if you're storing like 10 gigs and you only have 2 5 gig spots, it's going to start writing your disk here. It's going to pause it. It'll put a little marker at the end and say, we're starting at this different location. And then it'll start here. And so your machine knows to fill that file. So those files, that's a whole like low level system that's abstracted out by the operating system like Linux or Mac OS. And so IPFS, it doesn't care what your disk looks like, because it shouldn't, right? It's using the operating system and storing files in an operating system compatible way. So those individual files
what does that
might
mean?
be
What does that
scattered across
mean?
the disk.
What do you mean I'm storing it in an operating system way? I thought storing stuff on a hard drive would be an operating system way.
So your hard drive manages how things are stored.
In like a physical way.
In a physical way.
Okay.
IPFS tells your hard drive, hey, I have these pieces. And so the hard drive looks for wherever it can store them. So your individual IPFS file might be stored here, 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 all around the actual physical disk. And it might not match up with what you'd expect an original file to be stored as.
Is this just because IPFS is not designed for the physical world? Like, is it just they don't really care?
IPFS is really built around
designed for
interplanetariness. Yeah,
it's designed for interplanetariness.
But the way IPFS is built is specifically for random access memory, which you can think of as like your RAM or your solid state drives. So if you have a solid state drive, right, you're not writing to a disk.
True.
So it doesn't matter if your pieces are stored all around, because your solid state drive can just read them that way. And that's how a lot of new data is built to be stored. It's how the Jackal storage providers are angled as well. And what we see with that is IPFS is taking a bigger file, splitting it into a bunch of little chunks. And then those individual chunks are advertised out to the IPFS network so that when you request a larger file, it's going to go through and figure out all the chunks that it needs.
What do you mean they're advertised out? Buy these chunks. Buy these chunks.
Yeah, I mean, so there's a layer.
It like optimizes for like what chunks are closest to you and which chunks you can receive the quickest, essentially. In my mind.
Okay.
Yeah. So with the IPFS network, there's this thing called a distributed hash table, or a DHT, and that's spread across the entire IPFS network. And what ends up happening is machines that are connected to the network, if they have a file or a specific chunk of a file, they will say to that DHT, hey, I have this piece. And then everyone else around them goes, yeah, he does have that piece. And then so they'll all start kind of agreeing, and that table will then update to feature, hey, this piece is available at this location. And so what ends up happening is your individual file is now split into a bunch of pieces, and all of those pieces are advertised to that table, and it slowly gets updated over time, sometimes fast, depending on how well connected
is the Bitcoin ledger a distributed hash table? This sounds like
very
the same
similar
thing as a ledger.
It uses a lot of the same technology. Essentially, you're creating like a agreeing peer-to-peer network. Bitcoin uses a slightly different incentivized consensus mechanism. So there's a proof of work system in place rather than an unincentivized peer-to-peer network like IPFS has. Whereas like Filecoin is using an incentivized peer-to-peer network.
And that's why we're using an incentivized peer-to-peer network. So like IPFS is like an awesome discovery layer. So it's just like, hey, like I want this file, like find the file. But you
discover the chunks.
Go find all this stuff.
But it's all volunteer work, essentially.
But it needs to be stored somewhere, right? So that's why IPFS is like a discovery layer on top, and then there's a storage layer underneath. And Jackal would be a storage layer, Filecoin would be a storage layer, Saya.
And that storage layer is where the incentivization comes in.
Yeah,
and
to make sure that it stays.
Jackal storage providers are incentivized to store the files, but they're also compatible with IPFS. So now they're storing everything in this IPFS Unix FS format, which lets them very, very easily say to the IPFS network, hey guys, I have this file available if anybody wants to come download it. And then if you are somebody that is uploading NFT data or something along those lines to Jackal, now it's available on IPFS, so you can download it from IPFS and compatible systems.
That's the cool thing, right? So like all the NFTs that we're storing on Jackal recently, I don't know, we might have to bleep this out, but like the bad kids or the sloths or the mad scientists or the fruitopias of the world, they're IPFS standardized files. So, but they still need a place to put it. So that's why Jackal is the storage layer, and now you have this ability to index it via IPFS and then go find the file, and the files are stored on Jackal.
And then like, why did you guys pick though to choose to store the raw data? I guess raw data is the bad word to say because it gets changed into this IPFS format. Like, why did we choose just to let it sit in that format on these storage providers? Because we could have just have it
because it's
in
the
regular way.
It's a great discovery system, right? Like it's fast, it's nice. A lot of Web3 products and some Web2 products are starting to adopt it, like the golf simulator guys that are working with us, for example. It's just like a great way to index by content instead of indexing by location. And by doing that, it's a lot faster, it's a lot speedier. And the guys, we're getting feedback when you use Jackal where the files are in IPFS compatible way, and then they're also calling the file via IPFS. You're looking at they're saying this is faster than our Google Drive, which is pretty intense, right? So this is hitting cloud parity, exceeding cloud parity, and using the two platforms together. It's pretty special stuff.
Wait, why am I able to be faster than Google Drive with IPFS?
So
obviously that's awesome. Yeah. That's very cool.
When we look at IPFS, right, splitting an individual file into many different pieces, when we're dealing with traditional systems, we don't do that splitting. We have one file. Mm-hmm. And because we have one file, we're able to say, hey, server that has that file, I would like the file. And it will send it back to you, but it sends it back to you front to back. So if I have a full gigabyte file, it's going to send you the first byte, then the second byte, then the third byte, and it goes all the way until it hits the last byte. It's at that point that you can say, I have the file. IPFS, what makes it really special is because it's split it into a bunch of pieces, many storage providers can be storing the same file, and they're all going to be storing those same pieces. So now what you can do is your machine can actually request that original file, and it's going to be able to download 1/3 of the pieces from this machine, and 1/3 from this machine, and 1/3 from this machine.
I got piece 32 and piece 12, and I got piece 99. So it's just kind of filling based on how fast it comes in, rather than just being okay, turn left at the street and then go down, hit the stop sign, go through the stop sign, go to the lights, turn right at the lights, and then you'll find the file eventually.
It's able to do them all in parallel.
This is kind of just going by bird, by air.
So if I download the 86 piece first, that's fine. It slots it in, and it just completes the rest of the puzzle.
Reassembles your file as you get those pieces.
As the bird flies.
Based on the DHT, based on the distributed hash table.
And so what we look at with IPFS is there's a reason that traditional file systems aren't built this way, right? You have to do processing to know that you're going to want that file back that way from the get-go. So if I'm running a normal server where I'm hosting a website, I'm not necessarily going to use IPFS because my files are all probably pretty small because I'm just hosting something like a website, and I'm not going to want to put in the processing work and the potential storage overhead to build out the metadata tree that lists out how to put the file back together if the files are all small enough to not worry about it. But because IPFS went in with the idea that we're going to sacrifice a little bit of overhead and build out that metadata to say, hey, this is how you put the file back together, it allows us to build out a much faster, more parallelized system. So if you have a internet speed that has like a full 10 gigabit download.
I mean, I wish. But
That'd be
go
sick.
on.
I know.
Go on with this hypothetical. That sounds
Yeah,
amazing.
I got like 200 megs down on that Rogers.
did
Ooh,
have
yeah.
Rough.
Then you're able to, as long as the other storage providers are all kind of having similar internet speeds to you, you're able to basically fully saturate your line because you're not downloading one file at a time and trying to just get it all. Because at that point, you're almost relying more on their disk speed than their internet speed.
Yeah.
And if you're downloading every single piece in parallel, now you have like 100 different web connections going on and you're downloading 100 pieces all at the same time.
It's like almost like multi-threading, basically.
Yeah, it's exactly like multi-threading. So it's essentially multi-threading over your network, and it allows us to essentially cheat traditional download mechanisms and go way, way faster. Obviously, like you run into some issues where the initial file size is actually just a little bit bigger because of that metadata tree that it needs to build out to tell you how to put the pieces back together.
Which I guess would make sense, right? It has to hunk everything. And
Yeah,
like
it does it does a little bit of processing to put the file back together. But
in theory, if I'm going like hard drive to hard drive, nothing else is there. There's no network involved. The old way would be faster. Technically,
Yes.
by a tiny
If
amount.
you're wired in, like
Yeah,
between two,
but if it's
of
just like point A to point B, and like because like obviously chunking up the file and doing the
Yeah.
distributed hash table would get in the way. But
yeah, if you're
find
downloading
bottlenecks by the internet.
one IPFS file and you're moving it onto a second hard drive from the same machine, it's absolutely going to be slower to move over. Probably not by a lot. Admittedly, IPFS is really great at keeping things really, really small, but over the network, there's a lot of tiny little hacks that went into making IPFS just that much better for moving individual files over the network. And when we're looking at something like somebody's custom built storage system for whatever application they're running, they might have their own considerations and how they want to build their files out. And so they wouldn't necessarily go for something like IPFS because they want more traditional file storage. But because IPFS is simply designed for moving files over a network, it was able to do a lot of interesting things when it comes to kind of optimizing that file. And that's why we went that route. IPFS is open source. It's available to everyone. So we kind of built that into the structure of our storage providers where we still prove the file in a very traditional way. We load the whole file in, we pull out the piece, and we're not basing it off of IPFS pieces. We're kind of rebuilding the file out of the IPFS pieces at runtime, which has, again, a little bit of overhead. But the amount of times we need to prove the file versus the amount of times that we potentially need to download it over IPFS, that little bit of overhead, it's definitely
not that big
worth
of a deal.
providing it to IPFS.
It's just like by physics, if you have like two hard drives wired together, it's just gonna be faster. But like we have, like you're sending it from halfway across the world over like cables under the ocean through the internet to get to you, right? So it's just by physics gonna be slower, but by scalability, a lot better.
Well, wait, let's bring it back real quick to Jackal Vault and Jackal Pin. Everything's starting to make more sense in my mind. It's all coming together a little bit. Jackal Vault, obviously all the data on the protocol is going to the IPFS format. But when I'm using Vault on the upload or when I download, it's actually being put back in the old school format because my
Yes.
computer cannot actually interpret that IPFS data.
Yeah, your computer's not an IPFS node necessarily.
So I don't actually like touch IPFS when I use Vault. Maybe that's a bad word, but like, you know what I mean? I personally am not like, when I view the JPEG, it is not an IPFS format.
Yeah, and
It
we've
is,
been looking around at potentially like speeding things up by essentially turning your computer into an IPFS node.
So we're hijacking your computer.
Yeah, like while you're using the Vault, you're connected to IPFS.
Hey,
and
this
then
is
you can
self-custodial.
download all those
Your computer's got to
pieces.
do everything.
But it's not something that we've really built out or battle tested yet, but it's definitely something kind of on our plate because IPFS's downloads are so much faster. Depending on how quickly you can connect to the storage providers through IPFS bootstrapping, there's a very good chance that downloading files over IPFS instead of over traditional HTTP requests could be a lot faster.
Yeah.
So when I'm using Jackal Pin,
Yes.
how does that differ from Vault in the sense that like if I'm throwing something up there, Well, I guess they're both kind of doing the same thing, right? Like anytime I get a file back on my end, it's always being reinterpreted into whatever the old school format is. We need a name for the old school format.
But
I keep calling it linear.
For PIN, there's there's a bunch of different things, right? Like PIN is like a hosting platform where like there's no encryption. So like if you're doing NFTs or you're doing like the golf sim guys with their downloadable content server, where they're essentially like having people download different maps for different golf courses, for example.
Could like a video streaming service like use PIN? Could I like PIN?
Yeah,
movies?
I mean, we've been playing around. I think internally I threw the entire
I'll bleep
on
I'll bleep
IPFS.
Yeah. Shout out.
Just for internal use.
Yeah.
We own it on DVD.
Next week you'll do Shrek too.
Yeah. But essentially we were able to take a full movie and convert it into an open standard called HLS, which allows you to essentially stream video. And so if you only watch the first 10 minutes of a video, you're only ever going to get the first 10 minutes of the video downloaded, essentially.
Which is IPFS would be giving me maybe some of the end.
Yes.
If I was just raw dogging the IPFS.
And so you can split that file into this HLS format, which turns one movie into like 30 files or something like that.
What does HSL stand for? Hue, saturation, lightness.
HTTP live streaming.
Whoa.
It was...
There's an acronym inside of an acronym?
Yes.
Whoa. I didn't even know you were allowed to do that.
Funny enough, it was made by...
Acronymception, dude.
It was made by Apple. And I mean, Apple is not known for open sourcing things.
Or anything.
But the entire system that powers Apple Music is HLS.
Whoa.
And so they open sourced this entire standard, and it's built into like open platforms like FFmpeg. And what you get is the ability to turn a single video file into like 30 individual files, upload those files to IPFS, and then you can do full, almost like Netflix scale video streaming straight off IPFS.
Okay, so hold up. Now I'm into
baby.
it. I love a good
go.
video compression talk. I know about iframes and GOP structure and all this shit. So I take like a big video, like the fucking raw thing. I compress that bitch on my own, like some like GOP structure, group of picture things. Then that's getting tossed in HSL. Then that's getting tossed in IPFS. Then it's getting shot out to the world. Then it's getting reassembled via the IPFS. Then HSL's reassembling it. Then GOP structure is making sure all the frames are reflective and accurate. Then it's serving me back the video. There's a lot of layers.
Yeah,
there's a lot of layers.
There's libraries in place that make it really, really smooth, so you don't have to deal with a lot of it. So if you're using something like FFmpeg, you can just take in an individual video. And I think we have a library set up that's on our GitHub right now that nobody's really paid any attention to, where you can just basically like one click, give it a seed phrase that has Jackal loaded onto it, point it to a video, and it'll convert your entire video into this HLS format and do your upload to the Jackal protocol, which eventually gets it on IPFS. Yeah. And then it spits you out one little like identifier, and that identifier you can just take, shovel that onto an IPFS gateway, and your video starts playing.
Okay, I want to back up a little bit too, because I want to talk about, first off, I feel like we're having this conversation because I feel like I see so many Twitter posts and stuff, and it's a confusing subject, and I feel like people are always like, how does Jackal differ from IPFS? I feel like people always act like it's like a competitive sort of like thing, and I feel like no one quite understands that. So I now know that, you know, Jackal's like a storage layer.
I mean, the pinned tweet on my post on X is an explanation of how Jackal and IPFS are different.
It's very obvious, and the reason why I think that occurred is because back in 2021, everyone was like prioritizing like everything has to be decentralized. And people were competing so heavily. NFT marketplaces were competing against NFT marketplaces. Social was competing against social. And you have this situation where everyone's like rushing for like features. It's like, oh, like we're decentralized because we use IPFS for storage. And that's what they would say. But IPFS doesn't actually store anything.
Yeah, there's a good chance it was on AWS.
No, essentially what you're doing when it's stored on IPFS, you pretty much still have to put the file somewhere. So you put the file on your AWS server, you pay for that, and then you make it discoverable by IPFS. And there's a very
discoverable.
Yeah, so one's a discovery layer.
What does it mean to be discoverable?
It's how it's indexed, right? It's kind of just like how do you find the file?
Yeah, I mean, if you go to like google.com, right, you're eventually just getting what is essentially an index.html file.
Do you
from
go to
Google servers.
google.com? I just use the URL.
I use
part.
ChatGPT.
I go to google.ca because
What's that?
we're up north.
Canadian, baby. .ca.
Whoa.
You gotta
Yeah.
use that .ca up here.
Not Canada.
What does that do?
Jackalabs.ca.
Does it just
It just
censor
takes you-
stuff, or what
just
does it
takes you
do?
to the Canadian site.
No, I think we're .io for Jackal Labs. We should throw on .ca too. Just,
Yeah, we should have Jackal Labs.ca.
nationalize Jackal Labs with
Yeah.
our U.S. employees like you.
There's
But-
I didn't know there was a Canadian version of
course.
Google. I had no idea. I
Of
mean, I knew
course.
there was like a Chinese like off-brand version, whatever the fuck
Here's
that
the thing,
one's
right?
called.
You go to
the dog one.
google.ca and you get Canadian English version of Wikipedia instead of your American English.
Okay.
Wikipedia. So color adds a U like it. God
I
intended.
derailed us. How do I discover things? How do what does it mean to discover things? Because you're telling me IPFS, I'm downloading a little tiny chunks from 1,000 different things.
Yeah.
Aren't all those 1,000 different things storing
Where are they stored?
the file? I don't know. On the node, on the IPFS node.
So there's one place where the file is stored and incentivized to store it. So in this case, like usually for IPFS, it's like an AWS S3 bucket where the file is, and that is going to stay there.
Why is IPFS voluntary? Like,
Well,
is that what separates
That's
it?
why so Protocol
Incentivization?
Labs built IPFS, and then they were just like, oh shit. Like since it's voluntary and like the network only really works if a file is called a bunch, then it might be like Good Samaritans might store it closer to
As a
you
volunteer network.
as a volunteer network. But the situation and the fact of the matter is that like if it's not very called very often, and then
And human beings are selfish.
yes,
and don't like to
selfish humans,
volunteer.
and that AWS server goes down, you have the situation where like that file's off IPFS. So Protocol Labs was just like, okay, shit, this is back in like when did they start? 2017. They were just like, okay, we need to make like an incentivized storage layer for IPFS, and that's what Filecoin was built to be. Right?
So IPFS is older than Filecoin.
Yeah, so the Protocol Labs guys were like, we're gonna build Filecoin, so we're gonna use a proof of work blockchain, and we're gonna do all this stuff. But based on like the physics and the technology that they had at the time, it was like only good for like archiving, cold storage. So you want your file like can be up to 24 hours to get that back. So like they built that initially to solve the issue of having like an incentivized layer with crypto for IPFS. And that's why they're very similar.
Is that also why like Filecoin doesn't necessarily have to be hot? Because if it's supposed to be just kind of like a counterpart to IPFS,
Kinda, in a
if there's a
weird way.
file
The big
people
problem
want.
is though, Filecoin did this cool thing where they were like, yeah, to make our protocol efficient because we're proof of work and we can't sacrifice any sort of efficiency, we're going to convert the file to a different file format before we upload it. And what ends up happening is the file that is available on IPFS has a completely different content identifier than the file on Filecoin.
What?
So you can't
What?
use...
it was just based on the technology.
What? I did what? This is blowing my mind. Why would they be
Well,
different?
they had just they needed more efficiency, and based on the like the throughput and the latency and the bandwidth of like the blockchain technology back in 2017 when they started building, that was kind of like, in our opinion, obviously we're not Protocol Labs, we're like arguably a competitor to Filecoin, but so a grain of salt for everything that we're saying. But from our understanding is like they just needed to be as efficient as possible to make sure that the thing would scale.
And so when like one Filecoin node would need a file off another Filecoin node, it could use IPFS because it was all running within the same file format, right? So like if I upload frog.jpg, it will be like CID 123, and then if I put it to Filecoin, it'll be CID 456. Well, within Filecoin, that's fine because another node might go, well, I want 456.
Wait, I need you to back that up for a second. We've been talking about IPFS as a what is it? A content, or it stores things based on
Layer,
no, but it stores things based
Content
on
identifier.
content identifiers.
One's by content.
What
one's
is a
by
content
location.
identifier?
Yeah, I mean, so if you look at something like your traditional file explorer on
Yes.
like Windows, Mac OS, or Linux or whatever.
I have a file name.
Yes, you have a file name. So you could have like frog.jpg, right? And now if you draw a mustache on your frog, it's still frog.jpg, right? Because all that's happened is that identifier is now pointing towards different data.
First off, as a guy that does digital media stuff, I would never save over the other one. I would always version it up. So yes, continue with your metaphor of bad
I'm
practices.
glad you have good file naming practices, but most of us like
I don't.
like
I'm
to
bad.
like to
I'm
edit our
bad.
files.
Like I download something, I put one. It's just like, would you like to replace file? I say no, and I say two, and then like, would you like to release file? And it's like I just do like cat on the keyboard, and then I have a new file.
God.
So with that though, right? If you overwrite that file, both of them are called frog.jpg. If I'm hosting a website, for example, and I have my frog.jpg and I overwrite that with a mustache frog, now when I go to view my website, it's going to be a different frog there, even though the website didn't change. It's just the underlying image did. Exactly. So when you use IPFS, essentially it is coming up with a brand new content identifier based off of the data of the file. So unless the data of the file is changing, that content identifier will always be the same.
Does it hash the file to get the data?
It
Is this a
uses
thing?
hashing as well as they have a whole system built out called multi-hash.
So it's going through and it's like the pixels in the mustache area are new. The whole file is new.
Yes.
I can tell.
And so what's going to happen is if you draw a mustache over your frog, it's going to give it a brand new file name because that file name is the content identifier for, all
If you change a single pixel on a file and then you
even if you change the quality profile and you recompress
it's a new CID.
Gonna change the file completely.
So the versioning's automatically kind of built in, which is
I guess that's a good way to put it. I guess.
Yeah. So if you have a website where you have frog.jpg, right, and you upload it to IPFS and you index it that way, it's going to be like Q356 whatever
the hash is.
And if you then draw a mustache over it and re-upload it to IPFS, your website is always going to have the frog without the mustache because you didn't change the website identifier. And
because the old file, because the old CID is still good. The old CID is still good.
You're not indexing by. It takes back to like indexing by location. Indexing by location is like, hey, like a server's going like, hey, like storage server. I want the file that is in this like root, and then in this folder, and then this folder, and this folder, this folder, and then it's named this. Right? When you have a situation where it's indexed by content, it's just like, hey, I just want frog.jpg, send it to me. Right? Like it's just a lot more efficient that way.
So if I take so let's say I take the frog with the mustache. Let's say I draw a great hat on it. I'm thinking a fez, something like that. Let's say I draw the fez. Oh God, is this becoming like a racist frog because he has a fez and a mustache? No, it's great. It's cool. It's not racist. It's cool. Okay. Let's say we draw a fez on him. I'm going to keep just going with that example. Judge me if you want to. Okay, so the frog has a fez and a mustache, and he looks very handsome, very, very dapper.
It's getting late, clearly.
Okay. We're all here. We're not on the internet. I thumb drive that son of a bitch over to everyone's Kim and Peter. We all upload it to IPFS separately. Yeah. The network knows it's the same.
Yes.
It knows it's the same file.
And so if I was to go and request that file from the IPFS network,
it's going to take the fastest.
It's going to download the quickest route.
Way.
And even if that quickest route means taking certain pieces from your computer and certain pieces from Patrick's computer, and then I get the whole file.
Oh, it's not just based on like geographic or speed.
It's like however I can get it the fastest.
I want this content identifier, give it to me as quickly as possible.
Right now.
Yeah. And then so it goes and looks for all the individual chunks and downloads the fastest individual chunk every time.
I guess this is just popular on the internet because if there's something that goes viral or like anything like that, then that file will be served faster.
It's more likely that it'll be served on more volunteer networks.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm somebody that's running my own website where I use IPFS and somebody says, oh man, that frog picture is really funny, I want to use it in one of my blogs.
Thank you.
Well, now I'm going to go, wow, that frog, we need it because somebody on our blog platform really wanted to use it. So now we're going to have that frog picture as well. So now if somebody downloads it and I'm closer geographically to them and like internet speed and everything comes into factor, well, it might not ever even download it off the Jackal protocol because it's on my blog platform. And my blog platform might serve it to them faster.
So basically we hijacked like for our it's not a CDN, but I kind of want to call it
It might
a
as
CDN.
well be.
What's a CDN? Content Discovery Network.
Delivery Network. So like Cloudflare is a good CDN. Sometimes like if you have like a social media platform, you have the storage layer, but you want the CDN on top because you can serve it faster. Right?
Oh, okay.
So it's just like a dedicated system just for serving files to people
As quick as humanly possible.
As quickly as it's all like SSDs, it's all that kind of stuff. So you have
so it's just built for like raw speed.
yeah. So
Is IPFS a CDN?
kind of.
It doesn't fully
It's
meet the
not a
definition for
CDN,
CDN, but it is
it's
really
fast,
good at
really
doing the
fucking
job
fast.
of a CDN.
We're kind of Venn diagramming
So-
a small amount.
So yeah, exactly. So basically, like by us turning our storage providers into IPFS compatible storage providers, we just hijacked that CDN.
Yeah, and that's the other really cool thing is like if you have NFT platforms are a really, really great example where if you post an NFT collection, like a 10K PFP, and I upload all those files to Jackal, now they're on IPFS because of Jackal. Mm-hmm. If I upload them and I put those NFTs on something like Stargaze, Stargaze, if my collection is really popular, they will go and they will copy all of those files to their machines because they want their NFT marketplace to load really fast.
Are they
right?
copying it to their IPFS node?
Yeah, they would
Is that what it
have
is?
an IPFS system in place to make that happen. And so what ends up happening is when I go to visit Stargaze's website, they're going to show me their copy of that file that they downloaded off the IPFS network. So that visit to Stargaze, even though those NFTs were uploaded to the Jackal protocol, we never actually get that traffic onto our Jackal protocol nodes because Stargaze has deemed it important enough to cache a copy on their systems.
Okay.
But it still needs to be stored somewhere in the event that it's not.
That's not on the network anymore.
Yeah, in case Stargaze goes, wow, that collection sucks now and nobody's buying
How
them.
long does the
then they
cache
don't disappear.
last? How long does an IPFS cache last?
Depends on who's running it.
Yeah.
Depends how often you call it, depends on like a lot of different factors. But like the thing is that the most important thing about here is that no matter what,
They always have a
we
home.
got it.
Yeah.
We got it.
Like we have
The
home
buck
base.
stops here.
Like the buck stops at the Jackal incentive layer for people to make sure that no matter what happens, we still have the file.
And the reason why we're doing that is because if someone has a file on the Jackal protocol, if it wasn't on the IPFS network, whoever's the storage provider is just going to get like hosed. Like it's not going to work. Like the upload speed to serve the file to 10 bajillion people isn't going to happen. And
And it's pretty special that like we have like Jackal right now in its current state is the fastest, most like feature heavy IPFS storage layer, and that's why I think Jackal Pin's gonna go gangbusters.
amazing. What else should we talk about? I'm almost at the end of my drink. I feel
don't
like it's
know.
getting
Finished,
late.
yeah.
I feel like maybe we
Maybe.
simmer
It
down.
might be time to cut it here. Well, anyways, thank you for listening to all of our problems and how we're gonna fix them, and another drink with the devs and the bucks.
This one was a thick one. This one was a little thick. There was really a lot of layers, a lot of abstract layers, a lot of layers
If you
of.
made it to this point, shout at you for being like a giga nerd.
That's
like
what we say
us.
at the end
So,
of
yeah,
everyone.
yeah.
I don't
If
think
you
we should
made it
say
this
that.
far-
We're
If you
looking
made it
down
this
upon
far,
ourselves.
Just like seek help.
Yeah. But also, like, if you made it this far, like, go spin up like an IPFS node on your computer.
No, spin up a Jackal storage provider. What are you
Oh,
talking about?
Okay, but like if your computer's like a gaming machine that you use for gaming,
Wait, hold on.
you're not
on.
gonna
Yeah,
have space.
wait,
but
hold on.
please
Marston.
like support our IPFS
Wait,
mesh.
I want to spin up the incentivized one. I
No,
don't
we
want to
need
do the
both.
voluntary one.
Yeah, we need both.
I guess you
Yeah,
need both.
if you want to,
If you want to
If you wanna
download
make
stuff
money-
really fast, then get an IPFS.
if you want to
network,
make
but-
money, do the storage provider on Jackal. If you want to be a good guy, do the IPFS node on your computer.